is great. Good morning, everybody. I hope you've all enjoyed the start of the conference as much as I have. I'm here this morning to just talk a little bit about my university and its journey to the cloud, which has started a few years for us and has been a really exciting journey, and I'd like to share it with you. Before I start the talk about our journey, I thought I'd give you a little bit of background information on my particular university. I work for Edith Cowan University. Established in 1991, it's a relatively young university, but it's a university that can trace its foundations back to 1902 in Western Australia, and the then Claremont Teachers College, which was one of the first tertiary education institutions in Western Australia. From these early beginnings, it's become a quality, or it's transitioned into a quality university with 3 main campuses in Western Australia. We deliver over 300 courses to around 27,000 students. We're very proud of our 5-star student satisfaction rating for teaching quality, and we can boast Hugh Jackman as an alumni, so I'm pretty proud of that, and we've got some pretty impressive alumni members. And if ever some of those alumni come and visit campus, we get quite a high take-up amongst staff as well as the students to go and watch them. It's probably pretty obvious to say that I'm proud to work for ECU, and I think it's also pretty safe to say, working in the IT Services Centre, that since 1902 there's been quite a few changes in the technology that are required to support teaching and learning. Just to talk about those technology requirements a little bit, I joined the university about 5 years ago, and in that time I joined very shortly after a new CEO at the time, Elizabeth Wilson, who you've probably heard talk a little bit this morning. At that stage, about 5 years ago, we were really looking at what we needed to do in terms of technology services to deliver teaching and learning to our university, both then and into the future. At that time, we did a current state analysis, and to give you some insight to what we found at that time, we did a 6-week measurement of how our systems were performing at the time. And in that 6-week measurement period, we had something like 40 recorded outages, which lost us around 84 hours of productivity at the time. Our primary data centre at that stage was at capacity in terms of physical footprint. We were running out of power to be able to put new servers in. We had lots of single points of failure across all of our data, both of our data centres, which were on campus at the time. Our IT team at that stage was really struggling to juggle firefighting with all of the outages that we were seeing, maintenance activities, and then they had to handle new project works on top of that. So it's safe to say it was a pretty difficult environment. Morale in IT was at rock bottom, and customer satisfaction was very low as well. So what we did was we talked to lots of stakeholders across the university, and we presented a new proposal for a new operating model, one that would not only address the current issues that we could see, but would more importantly meet the needs of the universities into the future. We identified quite a number of drivers of change, and you can see on the foil here that we sort of worked out where we were at the time, and we looked at what we needed to move into the future. And those sorts of drivers and target state desires were, we wanted a cost base that could be very agile and elastic and could respond to demand. We were moving from quite a fixed cost model. We needed to be able to roll out new services and new systems very responsibly, rather than being tied to hardware ordering times and a data centre that couldn't fit any more hardware in it anyway. We wanted our existing services to become more stable and more reliable, and we also needed our new services to be delivered in a very stable fashion. And underpinning all of that, we recognised at that stage that we needed to put a real focus on information security, because there really hadn't been much of a focus on that up to that point of time, and we recognised we were on the cusp of that needing to become a very important focus. So they were all the things we needed to achieve. It sounds easy, right? That's what we were facing 5 years ago. Beautiful sunny skies, enter the cloud. We needed to change our thinking from delivering technology support to delivering technology services. Now, this wouldn't be achieved by one small change, but by a whole cultural and technical change program. I'm not going to go into that whole program here this morning. We're going to focus on just one small aspect of it, which was the recommendations and the approach that we wanted to move forward with the way we provisioned our infrastructure services. We looked at numerous options at that time, about 5 years ago. When we first joined, there was talk of building brand new data centres on campus, so reproducing the current model and just refreshing it. There was also talk at one stage of bringing in container-style data centres, which I'm not quite sure what that would have done to the aesthetic of the university, but sort of had some merit to it, I guess. But what we actually ended up doing with lots of consultation and quite a lot of analysis was we made a decision to move to a cloud-based services model, hence the picture of the cloud. We decided we would move to a hybrid cloud model, which would be a mixture of co-location, public cloud services and private cloud services. And that's what I want to talk about in a little bit more detail this morning. So having made that decision, we kind of looked at each other and said, okay, we know where we want to go, but how do we want to get there? We were very quick to admit on embarking on this journey that we didn't know what we didn't know. We knew we had lots of questions, and I've just put some of the questions, some of the big ticket items on the board there. And we really made a decision at that point to look for a partner who had done this before, who knew what the questions were, knew what the problems were, and would really be able to bring a lot of expertise to the table. So we went to the market, and we went out there with a very transparent and honest request for proposal, where we talked about what we wanted to achieve, not how we wanted to achieve it. To give you some sort of concrete examples of what I mean by that, is we went out to the market and we said, look, we've got all of these applications. Some of them are modern web applications which shouldn't propose a problems, but lots of them aren't. Lots of them are bespoke applications where we don't really have a good handle on what they are, but we need all of these to just work. You need to tell us how we can architect our hybrid cloud solution so that they will work. You need to tell us how we can make this transformation and have it all still perform as well as or better than it currently does. The other thing we did was, in assessing our current state, we were very aware of the risks in our environment, and so part of what we wanted, that we went to the market with, was we said, we need this to happen quickly. We have made a decision we're going to take a Big Bang style approach. We want to take our whole data centre and everything and put it out there, and we want to do it quickly. We want a 12-month transition period, which for the size of our estate was was a pretty demanding request. We're a little bit nervous about that decision, but only a very short few months later, we kind of made a little bit more comfortable with the decision to go quickly and go Big Bang by this event. What you're looking at here is a picture of an uninterruptible power supply that supplied our main data centre. We didn't call it a fire, we called it a smoulder because it sounded better. But we were about 3 seconds away from this unit bursting into open flame. The black on the back of the wall there is the soot from the heat generated from batteries melting down. You may not be able to see, but that's paper on top of the unit, which how that didn't catch fire, I have no idea. And the fireys who came responding to this event said we're about 3 seconds away from open flame. And if that had happened, the FM200 gas in our data centre would have dumped. And I've never had to try and restart servers after an FM200 dump. They say you can do it, but I didn't want to try it. I'm glad I didn't have to in this circumstance. It's not the time you want to be an operations manager when something like that happens. So to cut a long story and a long procurement process short, we did conclude our RFP. We ended up contracting with a company called Atos, which we hadn't really heard about before we went into the RFP process, but as we embarked on, we certainly got to know them very well. It is a company with an established cloud solution that is deployed around the globe with many cloud nodes around the globe. And they're actually a company that's provided the technology solutions to the Olympic Games since 1992. Their proposal was to build a brand new cloud hub in Perth in 2 Tier 3 data centres very close to our university, relatively close. And their solution not only gave us access to their cloud technology, they also included the ability for us to co-locate some of our hardware into the data centres as well, which was a really, really good idea because that really mitigated our risk where we had any appliances or any applications that just weren't going to go into their cloud solution. It just gave us an alternative there, so it's a really good idea. Again, having made that decision recently, that decision sort of was made more comfortable for us when Atos was announced as one of 3 technology partners to the WA government in the work that the WA government is doing. And they've also been successful in securing services to the Brisbane Commonwealth Games. So that's increased our confidence that Atos is with us as a strategic partner going forward in Perth, which is really good for us and good for them. So a little bit about the journey that we embarked on then. We actually signed a contract with Atos on the 31st of March in 2015. There was some acceleration at the end there because we were pretty determined not to sign the contract on the 1st of April. We migrated our first workload in June of 2016 and our last workload in November 2016. So as far as the actual transformation program went, we not only completed in less than 12 months, we completed in really almost 6, which was a pretty huge effort. It wasn't a small project for us. For the university, it was a pretty mammoth project. It took more than 35 staff across the IT services centre. And we did have an experience of thinking it was going to take this many staff, and then it was this many staff, and then it was this many staff, as we uncovered some complexity. But the guys and girls worked really, really hard and pulled together and did a fabulous job of making it all work for us. The migrations did take a lot more resource than we'd originally planned, and a lot of that, most of it, was actually in the planning and the design phases. Once we actually started migrating, it actually really picked up the pace and accelerated, so that was great. We ended up migrating over 500 servers, and the little bubble on the cloud, I should say, the little green cloud on the right-hand side there, which says we had no unplanned downtime, probably should be in flashing neon because that's a pretty amazing achievement. So we took away a lot of learnings from our project. There are a number of things that worked really well. When we first contracted with Atos and they said, oh, we're going to build you a new data centre, that kind of wasn't what I personally had in mind. I had in mind we were just going to take up somebody's cloud service that already existed. So for me, I just, oh really, we're going to build data centres? And I was a little bit nervous about that. But they did it. They contracted with 2 existing physical data centres in Perth, but they brought in all of the infrastructure, all of the networking, all of the connectivity that they needed to build their templated cloud solution in the Perth environment, which was terrific, and it worked really well with very little issue. Another thing that we thought might be a challenge as we went through this project was the risk of interruption to the business. You don't migrate 500 applications, some of which you haven't touched for years and years and years without being worried about the potential impact on your business. And the project went amazingly smoothly, and as I mentioned a little while ago, we had no unplanned downtime during the whole of the project. One of the reasons I think, and I want to call this out, one of the reasons we had a lot of success with the change aspects of the program was we had the unstinting support of our executive at the university. As you can imagine, we have people in our business who are teaching and learning, and on occasion when we had planned downtime, we would get feedback from them that this time wasn't right, that time wasn't right, and when you're trying to manage many, many different schools and centres, it can be very hard to get a time that suits everybody. And that was where our executive came in, because on a number of occasions they came to our support and said, no, this is when this has to happen. We have to keep this program moving, and that was invaluable for us. The other major risk that was on my radar was the potential to move from internal data centres, which were sort of like you could touch them. They were there with very good network response times. I was worried that if we moved them into an external data centre, depending on where it was, we could start to see network performance issues and delays. I was particularly worried about that if we ended up in eastern states data centres, because there's quite a long way between Perth and Sydney or Melbourne. But again, that's where the RFP response came into play, and Atos's excellent solution of building these data centres in Perth for us. And what we actually found, as even though they went from being, our data centres went from being here on campus where we could touch them to just a few suburbs away in Perth, there was a slight increase in network latency that we saw, but the excellent performance on the cloud platform more than negated that, and a lot of our applications actually performed much, much better in the target environment than they had been performing on campus, which was great. Of course, the project wasn't without its challenges. For the last few years, we have been driving very hard to improve our information security posture. And when we were working through the data centre project, the way that we thought that we could actually mature it again and get a really stepwise increase in function was to introduce more rigorous and more complex zoning within the new data centre environment. So we actually started down the path of doing that. In hindsight, it's probably a bit of a classic case of scope creep, but it was judged to be just too good an opportunity to pass up. What we did find, though, that it was just introducing a level of complexity and risk to the project that we actually just couldn't tolerate, and we really did lose some momentum and lose some forward progress when we started down this path. It is a great architecture, it is one that we want to pursue going forward, but we made the decision during the project to stop going down that path. We set it up, but we didn't re-architect our applications, or many of our applications anyway, as part of the move in. The other challenge that we had was we went into this project with our eyes wide open in terms of the complexity of our application landscape, the complexity of our applications, and how tricky it was going to be. We knew it was going to be really hard. It was a lot harder than we thought it was. Our applications were a lot more complex than we thought, even though we thought we knew how complex they were. We found lots of applications which we knew really well. We went over and they had little furphies that we had to correct. But we also had some applications which we knew nothing about, and we basically ended up having to migrate the development environment as best we could, and then see what broke and fix it and learn from that in the development environment and then do the production environment. But we did uncover a lot of complexities within individual applications and within the overarching architecture as well. The state of some of our systems, I'm sure all of us who look after data centres know that we sometimes have a tin in our data centres that hasn't seen the light of day for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. We had some tin that was like that, and everybody was very concerned that if we turned that off to move it, it wouldn't turn on again. And we had to really try and minimise the risk with that. We ended up not moving tin in 9 out of 10 cases. We did have one situation where we had to move a box and it didn't power on again when we got it to the other end. And then we just had to work around that with maintenance. So I guess the learning from that is before you even start this, make sure your maintenance and hardware support is in place, just in case. We also, I guess, one of the other areas that we focused on was mapping our processes, because of course doing a change like this is, yes, it's absolutely about making sure we end up with a technology environment that runs well, but it's about the processes and the people as well. And we did a lot of process work on the way through the project. I guess a couple of the challenges that we uncovered with that was we did a lot of process work early. And then as we went through the project, we uncovered learnings, we uncovered situations that needed us to go back and revisit that process work. So we really needed to make sure we had the flexibility to work on the processes as we went through the project and not just think we could do them all up front. We did make a small mistake here too, in that in doing that process work, we ended up unintentionally developing parallel processes rather than enhancing our existing processes. So at the end of the day, we ended up with more processes than we needed, and we needed to go back and re-amalgamate our processes so that we had, you know, single stream of processes. There were a couple of learnings which I won't call them issues, but they were just unexpected surprises. One activity that we hadn't adequately factored in moving into this very consistent environment was the amount of remediation work that we had to do on all of our applications. We basically had to touch every single system and do things like make sure the patching was up to date, make sure there was no software installed on there that shouldn't be, make sure our security accesses were correct on the box so that when we put it into the Atos environment, it could run safely in that environment. And that was just, again, it wasn't a problem. It was just a lot more effort than we expected and took a bit of resourcing. Our testing was another area that flexed and changed as we went through the process. When we started the project, we took the view that we're taking our applications and then we're moving them into a new environment. We're not touching the application itself. We shouldn't have to do application testing on all of our systems. And that actually worked okay, that was fine. But what we hadn't scoped, what we hadn't seen the magnitude of was all of the testing that needed to be done to make sure that this application could still talk to that application and could still see the internet and could still see. So the integration testing that we did was mammoth. And I think you saw on the diagram earlier, we did something like 9,000 plus test cases to just give ourselves the assurance that everything was good. The other area that we needed to pay attention to, and again took us a little bit by surprise, were our backups. We came from an environment where our backups were going to a tape device, and those tapes went off and got stored somewhere forever, basically. We had the luxury of not really worrying about them too much. When we went into the new infrastructure as a service environment, all of a sudden, not on tape, on storage, and that became quite a significant cost quite quickly. The learning we took away from that was to just be very careful to make sure you scope all of your data and don't just think about the stuff that's on the disk. There might be some stuff that's on a tape in a cupboard somewhere that you need to worry about. So I guess in conclusion, our journey to the cloud started in 2015, and I think we all felt like we'd set foot on a road that stretched into the distance, uphill most of the way, with lots of twists of turns. During the project, it actually felt insurmountable, and we had quite a few people tell us, from external to the university, that they didn't know anybody who was moving their whole data centre into the cloud like we were. And that always made us feel like the road was a little bit steeper for a time, but we just kept on putting one foot in front of the other. Now at the end of the project, which wrapped up in January of this year, it's fair to say that we've had some teething issues and we're in the process of bedding down our new target state. But the whole of the team at the university is really proud of the success that we had, and we're all confident that we've put in place a strong foundation for the university to support the teaching, learning and research needs going into the future. So thank you, and I have time for questions, I think.
One question through the app from Alex from the University of Auckland says, hi Louise. Did you also migrate your research data to the cloud or just applications for a
We moved all of our data to the cloud that was living in our data centres, so that means our file storage, our databases, etc. In terms of specific research data that might be on storage that wasn't in our data centre, that hasn't moved, and anything that was kept external to the university's infrastructure stayed where it was, and we maintained all of those connections. But anything that was stored in the data centre was moved. So yes. In terms of implications of moving data into an external service provider, one of the questions that we did face when we went out to RFP was the Data Retention Act, insuring data, offshoring data. Sorry, not the Data Retention Act, the Patriot Act, if our data ended up in America or somewhere like that. But again, this is where the response to the RFP really helped us because with a vendor coming in and saying, "Oh, we'll keep your data in Perth for you," all of those questions just didn't have to worry us anymore, so it was really good.
Just a follow-up on that, did you have any research high-performance computing you had to move as well? Or?
No. It was all corporate apps, so all on not regular storage, not high-performance compute.
Just to follow up on that one, if I could, what was the impact on your data centre staff, like in terms of people that were working on the team day-to-day? How did that?
Yeah, we did end up having to go through a change process because basically the provider now for the ADOS data centre is providing our system administration resource. So we had to go through a process as we no longer required that capability in-house. And we'd actually done something, we'd had a similar impact earlier as well because the other change that we had made a year, 18 months earlier was to have our network management taken over by an external company as well. And we ended up, in order to manage our risk, we discontinued, I guess, those two capabilities at the same time.
Do you have an on-net connection? Is that right?
We do. So we have, during the design, we looked at whether we wanted to put our RNet connection into the data centre or into on campus, and we've ended up retaining it on the campus, but either was an option. By underlying platform, do you mean the Red Hat window? Sure. I mentioned earlier that a lot of time on the project was spent on the planning and design, and the actual migration was fairly short. A lot of work was done around mapping the interdependencies to make sure that when the database moved, as many of the applications that connected to that database went at the same time. We really tried to reduce spanning between the on-campus and the new data centre because we just felt that was a high-risk position. But having said that, the way we designed the network, it was connected and transparent. So even if we did end up with an application span from its database, it coped with it and it ran. Yeah, actually, we were about 90% virtualised, 85-90% virtualised before we started this process. We virtualised up to 99% as part of this because in trying to move physical tin, one of the options was to virtualise rather than move the tin, and we decommissioned something like 500, maybe 30, 40, quite a reasonable number of systems that we just realised we didn't need to move at all and we could turn off.